November 14th, 1953. 11:52 p.m. According to Harlem legend, Marcus, Big Mike, Williams stood 3 feet behind Bumpy Johnson with a loaded .38 special pressed against his spine. His hand was shaking. Not from fear. From something worse. From the weight of what he was about to do. Bumpy sat at his usual corner table in Small's Paradise on 135th Street. Back turned. Completely vulnerable. He was talking with Illinois Gordon about a shipment coming in from Philadelphia. Relaxed. Trusting. Unaware. The story goes that Big Mike had been Bumpy's bodyguard for 6 years. 6 years of watching his back. 6 years of taking bullets meant for him. 6 years of loyalty that everyone in Harlem recognized and respected. And now, according to the legend, for $50,000 and a promise of protection from the Genovese family, Big Mike was about to end all of that with one pull of the trigger. He raised the gun, aimed at the back of Bumpy's head, took a breath, and pulled the trigger. The sound that reportedly followed wasn't a gunshot. It was a click. A hollow, mechanical click that echoed through the suddenly silent club like thunder. Bumpy didn't flinch. He didn't turn around. According to witnesses who were present that night, he just took a slow sip of his cognac, set the glass down gently, and said 4 words that would become legend in Harlem. "I've been expecting you." What nobody knew at the time, what the history books will never tell you because no official records exist, is that, according to sources close to Bumpy Johnson, he had known about the betrayal for 2 weeks. And what he reportedly did in those 2 weeks didn't just save his life. It changed the definition of power in Harlem forever. To understand what happened that night at Small's Paradise, you need to understand who Bumpy Johnson was in 1953. He wasn't just another gangster running numbers in Harlem. By the early 50s, Bumpy Johnson was the most powerful black man in New York. He controlled the policy rackets, had partnerships with the Italian mob, owned legitimate businesses, and had politicians on speed dial. But power attracts enemies. The Italian families tolerated Bumpy because he was useful. He kept Harlem stable, kept the money flowing, kept the peace. But tolerance isn't loyalty. And by 1953, certain factions within the Genovese family were getting tired of sharing Harlem's profits. They wanted Bumpy gone. But there was a problem. You couldn't just walk into Harlem and kill Bumpy Johnson. The neighborhood protected him. His people protected him. And Bumpy himself was too smart, too careful, too aware of threats. So the Genovese family did what desperate men always do when they can't win a fair fight. They looked for someone on the inside. October 28th, 1953. 2 weeks before the assassination attempt. Vincent the Chin Gigante called a meeting at a social club in Little Italy. The Chin was one of the most dangerous men in the Genovese family. Not the loudest. Not the flashiest. But the most dangerous. Sitting across from him was a mid-level enforcer named Tommy Eboli. "We need to solve the Bumpy problem," the Chin said, his voice low and gravelly. "We've tried before," Tommy replied. "Bumpy's too protected. Too connected. Every time we move on him, he sees it coming. That's because we're coming from the outside," the Chin said. "We need someone from the inside. Someone he trusts." Tommy leaned back. "You want to flip one of his people?" Not just any of his people. His bodyguard. Tommy's eyes widened. Big Mike Williams? That's Bumpy's right hand. The man's been with him for years. He's loyal. The chin smiled coldly. Every man has a price, Tommy. Every single one. Find out what Big Mike's price is. It didn't take long to find out. Big Mike Williams had 3 children. His youngest daughter, Angela, was sick. Leukemia. The treatments were expensive. Experimental. The kind of medicine poor families in Harlem couldn't afford. Big Mike had been borrowing money from everyone he knew. He'd asked Bumpy for help, and Bumpy had given him $5,000. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. The hospital bills kept piling up. The doctors kept saying they needed more tests, more treatments, more money. Big Mike was drowning. And that's when Tommy Eberly made his approach. November 1st, 1953. Big Mike was leaving the hospital after visiting Angela when a black Cadillac pulled up beside him. The window rolled down. Tommy Eberly sat in the back, smiling like a funeral director offering condolences. Mike, right? Big Mike Williams? Mike's hand moved instinctively toward his waistband, where he kept his piece. Who's asking? A friend. Someone who wants to help with your daughter's situation. Mike froze. How do you know about my daughter? I know a lot of things, Mike. I know the treatments cost $20,000 a month. I know you're 3 months behind on payments. I know the hospital's threatening to stop her care. And I know Bumpy gave you $5,000, which lasted about 2 weeks. Mike's jaw tightened. What do you want? Tommy gestured to the empty seat. 5 minutes. Just hear me out. Big Mike should have walked away. Should have told Bumpy immediately. Should have done 100 things differently. But when you're desperate, when your child is dying, when you're running out of options, you make choices that don't make sense to anyone else. Mike got in the car. Tommy didn't waste time. He opened a briefcase. Inside were neat stacks of $100 bills. $50,000, Tommy said. Cash. Right now. Enough to pay every hospital bill. Enough to get Angela into the best cancer treatment center in the country. Enough to save her life. Mike stared at the money. For what? Tommy's voice was calm, almost sympathetic. You know what, Mike? You've been in this life long enough. You want me to kill Bumpy. We want you to do a job. A simple job. 1 moment. 1 trigger pull. And your daughter lives. Mike's hands were shaking. And if I say no? Tommy closed the briefcase. Then Angela dies in that charity ward while you watch. Then you keep working for Bumpy, knowing you had a chance to save her and didn't take it. Then you live the rest of your life wondering if you made the right choice. Tommy slid a piece of paper across the seat. A phone number. You have 72 hours to decide. After that, the offer expires. And Mike, this conversation never happened. If you tell Bumpy, we'll deny it. And then we'll make sure Angela's treatments stop immediately. Understand? Mike took the paper, got out of the car, and watched the Cadillac disappear into traffic. That night, Mike couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Angela's face, her weak smile, the way she tried to be brave, even though she was in so much pain. He kept seeing that briefcase full of money, $50,000. His daughter's life. All for one trigger pull. 3 days later, Mike made the call. "I'm in," he said quietly. "But I want the money up front. Half now, half after." "Done. Done," Tommy replied. "Welcome to the winning side." What Big Mike didn't know, what Tommy Eboli didn't know, was that before Mike even got into that Cadillac, Bumpy Johnson already knew about the approach. Bumpy Johnson didn't survive 40 years in the underworld by trusting people. He survived by watching people, by understanding that loyalty is fragile, by knowing that every man has a breaking point. And Big Mike had reached his. Bumpy had noticed the change in Mike 3 weeks earlier. The way Mike's hands shook sometimes. The distracted look in his eyes. The heaviness in his shoulders. Bumpy knew about Angela. Knew about the hospital bills. Knew Mike was struggling. So Bumpy did what he always did. He watched. And he waited. October 31st, 1953. The night before Tommy Eboli's approach. Bumpy was having dinner at his apartment with his most trusted associate, Junie Bird. Junie had been with Bumpy since the 30s. If Bumpy trusted anyone completely, it was Junie. "Big Mike's in trouble," Bumpy said, cutting into his steak. Junie looked up. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that makes a man do things he never thought he'd do. His daughter's dying. Medical bills are crushing him. He's desperate." "You think he'd turn on you?" Bumpy was silent for a moment. "I think if someone offered him enough money to save his daughter, he'd have to think about it. And thinking about it is the first step toward doing it." "So what do you want to do? Cut him loose? Send him away?" Bumpy shook his head. "No. I want to see how far he'll go. I want to see if he's strong enough to choose loyalty over survival." Junie frowned. "That's dangerous, Bump. If he decides wrong, you're dead." "Or," Bumpy said quietly, "I turn his betrayal into a lesson that everyone in Harlem remembers for the next 50 years. The next day, Bumpy had one of his street runners, a kid named Terrell, follow Big Mike. When Mike got into Tommy Eboli's Cadillac, Terrell wrote down the license plate and reported back to Bumpy within the hour. Bumpy made one phone call to a contact in the Genovese family. 20 minutes later, he knew everything. The offer. The 50,000. The timeline. Most men in Bumpy's position would have killed Big Mike immediately. Quietly. Permanently. But Bumpy Johnson wasn't most men. He called Junie back to his apartment that night. Big Mike took the bait. Bumpy said. "So what now?" Bumpy pulled out a small wooden box from his desk drawer. Inside was a .38 special. Big Mike's gun. The one he carried every day. "How'd you get that?" Junie asked, surprised. "I had someone lift it from his apartment yesterday while he was at the hospital. Had a gunsmith make a few modifications." Junie picked up the gun, examined it. "Modifications?" "The firing pin's been filed down. Gun looks perfect. Feels perfect. Loads perfectly. But when you pull the trigger, nothing happens. Just a click." Junie stared at Bumpy. "You're going to let him try to kill you?" "I'm going to let him commit. I need him to pull that trigger in front of witnesses. I need everyone in Harlem to see what happens when you betray Bumpy Johnson. And if something goes wrong, If he brings a different gun? Bumpy smiled. Then I guess we'll find out if I'm as untouchable as everyone thinks. Over the next 2 weeks, Bumpy watched Big Mike carefully. Watched him struggle with the decision. Watched the guilt eat at him. Watched him become a ghost of the man he used to be. And then, on November 13th, Bumpy's contact confirmed it. Big Mike had made the call. The hit was scheduled for the next night. November 14th. Small's Paradise. 11:50 p.m. Bumpy told Junie to spread the word quietly. Make sure the right people were in the club that night. Not just anyone. Bumpy's inner circle. The people who mattered. The ones who would tell the story correctly. Because this wasn't just about survival. This was about sending a message that would echo through New York's underworld for decades. November 14th, 1953. 10:30 p.m. Small's Paradise was packed that night. 200 people. Musicians, hustlers, neighborhood folks, and mixed in quietly, 20 of Bumpy's most trusted men. They weren't there to protect Bumpy. They were there to witness. Big Mike arrived at 11:15. He was sweating despite the cool November air. In his jacket pocket was the .38 Special. The gun he'd carried every day for 6 years. The gun he'd used to protect Bumpy a dozen times. Tonight, he'd use it to kill him. Mike positioned himself at his usual spot. 3 feet behind Bumpy's chair. Close enough to protect. Close enough to strike. Bumpy sat at his corner table with Illinois Gordon, discussing business. His back was turned to Mike. Vulnerable. Trusting. At 11:47, Mike's contact, a man named Paulie, who worked for Tommy Eboli, walked past Mike and nodded once. That was the signal. Do it now. Mike's hand moved to the gun in his jacket. His heart was pounding so hard, he thought everyone in the club could hear it. He thought about Angela. Thought about the $50,000. Thought about saving her life. He pulled out the gun. The bartender saw it first. His eyes went wide. But before he could shout, Mike had already raised the weapon, aimed at the back of Bumpy's head, and pulled the trigger. Click. The sound cut through the jazz music like a knife. The band stopped playing mid-note. Conversations died mid-sentence. 200 people turned to look at Big Mike standing there with a useless gun in his shaking hand. And Bumpy Johnson sitting calmly, still not turning around, just taking a slow sip of his cognac. Bumpy set the glass down. Then, slowly, deliberately, he turned in his chair. He looked at Mike. Just looked at him. And in that look was something more terrifying than anger. It was disappointment mixed with understanding. "I've been expecting you," Bumpy said quietly. Those 4 words hit Mike harder than any bullet. Because in that moment, Mike understood. Bumpy had known everything. The approach from Tommy Eboli. The 50,000. The desperate choice between loyalty and his daughter's life. And instead of killing Mike, instead of making him disappear, Bumpy had let him walk into this room and pull that trigger. Let him reveal himself to 200 witnesses. Let him destroy his own honor in front of everyone who mattered. The gun clattered to the floor. Mike's legs gave out. He fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," Mike choked out. God, Bumpy, I'm sorry. My daughter, she's dying. I didn't know what else to do. I know about Angela. Bumpy interrupted, his voice still quiet, but carrying through the silent room. I've known for months. Bumpy reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. He dropped it on the table in front of Mike. Angela's medical bills. All of them. Paid in full as of this morning. She's also been accepted into a treatment program at Johns Hopkins. Best cancer center in the country. All expenses covered for the next 2 years. Mike stared at the envelope, his hands shaking. But how? When? 3 weeks ago, Bumpy said. When I realized how desperate you were. When I realized someone might try to use that desperation against you. Against me. Mike's voice broke. Then why didn't you tell me? Bumpy stood up. He wasn't a tall man, 5'9". But in that moment, he seemed 10 feet tall. Because I needed to know, Mike. I needed to know if you'd choose money over loyalty. If you'd choose their 50,000 over what we've built together. If you'd choose to be bought or to be a man. Bumpy paused, letting the words sink in. Now I know. The club was so silent you could hear people breathing. You're going to leave Harlem tonight, Bumpy said. You're going to take your family and move. I don't care where. But if I ever see your face again, if I ever hear your name again, Angela won't have a father. Do you understand? Mike nodded, unable to speak. And Mike, Bumpy's voice dropped even lower. When Tommy Eboli asks you what happened here tonight, you tell him exactly what you saw. You tell him Bumpy Johnson knew. You tell him the gun didn't fire because Bumpy Johnson doesn't get killed. He gets betrayed, and he turns betrayal into power. You tell him if the Genovese family ever tries something like this again, they'll learn the same lesson you just learned. Mike stood on shaking legs, picked up the useless gun, and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted for him like he was already a ghost. He walked out of Small's paradise and never returned to Harlem. The last anyone heard, he'd moved to Detroit, got a job at an auto plant, raised his kids quietly. Angela survived. The treatment worked. She lived to be 73 years old. But Big Mike never stopped carrying the shame of that night. Never stopped hearing Bumpy's voice in his head. I've been expecting you. After Mike left, Bumpy turned to face the room. 200 people stared at him in silence. They'd just witnessed something impossible. They'd watched a man try to assassinate Bumpy Johnson at point-blank range. And they'd watched Bumpy turn that assassination into a demonstration of power so complete, so overwhelming, that the would-be killer walked away broken. Let me make something clear, Bumpy said, his voice carrying to every corner of the club. People think power comes from violence, from fear, from how many men you can hurt. He picked up his cognac glass. They're wrong. Real power comes from knowing what's coming before it arrives, from turning your enemy's plan into your victory, from making betrayal impossible because everyone knows you're 3 steps ahead. Bumpy raised his glass. To Harlem. And to loyalty that can't be bought. 200 people raised their glasses. To Harlem. The jazz band started playing. Again. Conversations resumed. Within minutes, it was as if nothing had happened. Except everything had happened. By morning, every mobster from Boston to Baltimore had heard the story. Bumpy Johnson's bodyguard tried to kill him at point-blank range. The gun didn't fire. Bumpy had known about the hit for 2 weeks. He'd let it play out. He'd made the traitor reveal himself in front of 200 witnesses. And he'd done it all without spilling a drop of blood. The Genovese family called an emergency meeting the next day. Vincent, the Chin, Gigante was furious. Not at Bumpy. At Tommy Aboli for failing. But the family's consigliere, an old-timer named Anthony Strollo, saw something else. "We can't beat this man," Strollo said quietly. "We've tried everything. We turned his bodyguard, his most trusted man, and Bumpy saw it coming. He knew before we even made the approach. How do you fight someone like that?" "So, what do you suggest?" the Chin demanded. Strollo lit a cigar. "We leave Bumpy Johnson alone. We maintain the partnership. We collect our percentage, and we stop trying to take what's his. Because every time we move against him, he turns it into a victory." It was the first time the Genovese family had ever backed down from a power play in Harlem. But they had no choice. Bumpy Johnson had proven something that night at Small's Paradise. He wasn't just a gangster. He was a strategist. A chess player who saw moves before his opponents even thought of them. The story of Big Mike's betrayal became instant legend in Harlem. People told it for decades. Passed it down to their children, their grandchildren. It became more than just a story. It became a lesson about loyalty, about thinking ahead, about what real power looks like. And every version of the story, whether it was told in barbershops or bars or street corners, always ended the same way. With 4 words that defined Bumpy Johnson's entire life. "I've been expecting you." Bumpy lived another 15 years after that night. He died in 1968. Not from a bullet, but from a heart attack. Ironically, in the same Small's Paradise where he'd faced down Big Mike. But the legend of that night never died. Because Bumpy proved something that most people miss. The most dangerous weapon isn't a gun. It's knowing what's coming before your enemy does. It's turning their plan into your victory. It's being so far ahead that by the time they pull the trigger, you've already won. Look, here's what makes this story so powerful, regardless of whether every detail can be verified. Historical records confirm several things. Bumpy Johnson was indeed one of the most powerful figures in Harlem during the 1950s. The Genovese family did have ongoing tensions with black numbers operators. And Bumpy's reputation for being impossibly ahead of his enemies was well documented. This particular story, the bodyguard, the gun, the clique, exists in Harlem's oral history. It's been told and retold for 70 years. Some versions say the gun jammed. Others say Big Mike froze. Some insist Bumpy had switched the gun. The details vary depending on who's telling it. But here's what doesn't change. The lesson. The story isn't really about whether a gun fired or didn't fire. It's about what it meant to betray Bumpy Johnson. It's about the cost of disloyalty. It's about a man who understood human nature so well that he could turn betrayal itself into a demonstration of power. Whether this exact event happened on November 14th, 1953, or whether it's a composite of multiple incidents, or whether it's a legend that grew from smaller truths, what matters is that this story defined Bumpy Johnson's legacy. He knew Big Mike was desperate. He knew the Genovese family would try to exploit that desperation. He knew they'd make an approach. And instead of reacting with violence, instead of killing Mike preemptively, Bumpy let the entire situation play out. Why? Because Bumpy understood something that most men in his position never learn. The most powerful move isn't stopping your enemy. It's letting your enemy reveal themselves and then showing everyone that you saw it coming all along. That's the difference between a gangster and a legend. A gangster kills his enemies. A legend turns his enemies' moves into demonstrations of his own power. Big Mike walked out of Harlem alive, but he was destroyed. His reputation gone. His honor shattered. And everyone who heard the story understood the message. You can't surprise Bumpy Johnson. You can't outsmart him. You can't buy his people. Because he's always 3 steps ahead. Always watching. Always knowing. That's why this story survived for 70 years without a single police report or court record or newspaper article. That's why this story survived for 70 years without a single police report or court record or newspaper article. Because legends sometimes capture truth better than facts ever could. It explains why Bumpy Johnson was considered untouchable. Not because he was the most violent, not because he was the most ruthless, but because people believed he understood human nature better than anyone else in the game. Whether Big Mike Williams was a real person, whether the gun really clicked, whether Bumpy really said, "I've been expecting you," these details matter less than what the story represents. It represents the idea that true power isn't about the gun in your hand. It's about knowing your enemy's move before they make it. It's about understanding that desperate men make predictable choices. It's about staying 3 steps ahead in a world where most men can barely see 1 step in front of them. And that's a lesson that's absolutely real, whether this specific event happened exactly as told or not. If this story changed the way you think about power, intelligence, and staying 3 steps ahead, do me a favor and hit that like button right now. And if you're not subscribed to Bumpy Johnson, the Harlem Godfather yet, what are you even doing? We're dropping stories like this every single day, and trust me, the next one is going to blow your mind. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think Bumpy was right to let Big Mike walk away alive? Or should he have handled it differently? And hey, turn on those notifications, because next week, we're telling the story of how Bumpy Johnson walked into a room full of Italian mobsters unarmed and walked out controlling half of Harlem. You don't want to miss that. Remember, in Harlem, respect wasn't given. It was earned. And Bumpy Johnson earned every ounce of his. This is Bumpy Johnson, the Harlem Godfather. And we're just getting started.